Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's edition, we got a little bit of Beyond the Coverage and a little bit of story time with Chris because Bora Hansgrohe have some interesting news. 3 riders on the roster that was made way back in November are getting bumped off before Giro d'Italia starts proper. Now, one, Leonard Kamna, he's had an accident. No way he can start. Sam Welsford's had a little bit of drop in form, so he's getting bumped off. And then Emmanuel Bookman, gone very well in the Giro d'Italia in 2022. He was top 10. He's getting left off. Now, how's that mixed with story time? Well, in 2009, I was bumped off when I was riding for Astana, so I'll mix that and explain a little bit of what some of the directors sportifs are thinking over there in Bora Hansgrohe. And then in 2012, I was off and then put back on just before the Tour de France started proper and showed up very late, but made it in time to start the 2012 Tour de France. Now, there's big news up here on the channel because from now through the Giro d'Italia, all the episodes are made possible from Bicycle. They're the largest global marketing place for pre-owned and refurbished bikes. They make the selling process between the buyer and the seller safe, convenient, and easy. And guys, when I went on their list and checked out their bikes are made beautiful. And when they're talking about making it safe, reliable, and easy for you, what that means is if you're interested in buying one of their bikes, whether if it's a refurbished bike like something I have right here, because guys, this is way back in the day when I was working at Hal's Bike Center. I picked this up in the 90s when Hal retired and haven't built it up yet. But if you're looking for something old and classic, that's what they mean by refurbished. And they'll make the process safe, convenient, and easy for you if you're looking for a pre-owned or refurbished bike. Now, they're going to sponsor the channel all the way up through the Giro d'Italia, so that's big news up here for Beyond the Coverage and the Butterfly Effect and, of course, story time. But let's get into the video now and start talking about like what's happening over there with Bora Hansgrohe and why is it happening? Well, originally in 2009, when I was riding for Astana, I was riding fantastic. I was on good form. I was going really well before the Basque Country. Crashed out of the Basque Country while I was riding for Alberto Contador, who of course we know has won a couple of Tour de France's and won the 2009 Tour de France that same year. But before we get to the Tour de France that year, I crashed out of the Giro d'Italia right around stage 10, and I was sitting top 10 on the general classification. And then I was over in Aspen, training in Aspen with Lance Armstrong, Levi Leipheimer, when I was bumped off like the week before the Tour de France began. It was a dark and scarring month of July, watching it from the Chesterfield at my home in San Diego, California. But, of course, we know the story that Alberto Contador went on to win that year's Tour de France. Well, that's the way it looks from Alberto Contador's view. But think about with Lance Armstrong when we go into that Stage 4 team time trial and they lose the yellow jersey for the Texan at the end of that Stage 4. They win this time trial, of course, but they lost the race leader's yellow jersey by something of 0.9 of a second to Fabian Cancellara. So Lance Armstrong is not wearing the race leader's yellow jersey. If I was on the team for that day, Stage 4 of the team time trial, I'm sure Lance Armstrong has had himself in the race leader's yellow jersey for that Tour de France. That makes the Tour de France 100% success for the team from Stage 4 on. And of course, Alberto Contador later goes on to win the Tour de France. So it would have been a magnificent result in terms of having the sponsorship and the name of Lance Armstrong wearing yellow as his comeback Tour de France and Alberto Contador winning the general classification, with Lance finishing high up on a podium spot in that year's 09 Tour de France. But they left me off. Now, when I fast forward you guys all the way up to 2012, I just finished the Tour of California that I won the year before, but I didn't win the next year in 2012. And to top it off, after the last stage of the Tour of California, I pinched a nerve in my back so I could barely get out of bed. Now, Johan Bernal called me up and he said, "Hey, I need you to do Tour of Swiss to make sure you're okay." I said, "I can't do Tour of Swiss because if I get on a plane right now with my back bad, it's going to get even worse and I'm going to miss training days. When I fly over, I'm going to miss the training days of 2 days and 3 days right before the Tour of Swiss begins. And then I'm going to probably not be good at the Tour of Swiss and I'm going to lose more training days trying to recover from the Tour de Swiss, getting ready for the Tour de France." He said, and rightfully so, I agree with his knowledge here of saying that, "Hey, I need to see that you're still good." And I said, "Johan, I'm good. I just need a few days to recover, get the back normal again. Then I'll have a solid 2 weeks of training before the Tour de France starts in San Diego, California, in 90, 95, 105 degree weather. I will be ready for the Tour de France. If I'm not ready, I will tell you that I'm not ready and I'll be 100% honest." Well, I was bumped off the team anyways, and then as the training kept coming good and coming good, I'm begging for a ride. I'm calling up Johan all the time, begging him, saying, hey, just put me on. Please, the numbers are good, the power's good, the back is being good again. I had a few days off, I got ready for the Tour de France. He finally put me on late, and I mean late. I showed up at the Tour de France right as they're doing the team presentations the days before the Tour de France started proper, when I should have been there 2-3 days earlier. And instead of coming in way late, they handed me a brand new bike from Trek that they just came out with, a Madone model, and I was riding it for the first time 2 days before the Tour de France. Started that year's Tour de France. We won the team classification, this gorgeous trophy right here. I got all kinds of props out here on Beyond the Coverage and Story Time with Chris in today's edition. But what I'm getting to is you got to have faith in your riders. Now, when we start getting over to the story for Beyond the Coverage, it's the Bora Hansgrohe, right? 3 riders, like I've told you, are off the roster. When I look at Sam Welsford, their sprinter, it becomes a little bit easy to see with Sam Welsford that his form's not 100%. And when you look at the sprinters coming to the 24 Giro d'Italia, well, they're remarkable sprinters, right? We have Caleb Ewan starting, Olaf Koy's here, Tim Miller showing up, and that's just 3 of the 10 to 12 top sprinters showing here. So if Sam Welsford's not on 100% form, I can understand why you're not taking him. We go over and look at Leonard Kamna. Leonard Kamna had a bad accident while at altitude training camp getting hit by a car, and he was stuck down in the Spanish hospitals until just recently when he's been released to be able to go back up north to his home. So it's easy to see Leonard Kamna, little more easy to explain with Sam Welsford, little room in there if Sam Welsford said, hey, maybe the form comes better because they're not really bringing a pure sprinter to this year's Giro d'Italia. It's going to be, they're going to replace Sam Welsford with Danny Van Poppel, who I don't know if he can win. Certainly outright in a field sprint of this quality, because this is going to be a remarkable sprint quality field here at the Giro d'Italia. I don't see Danny Van Poppel winning either, but Danny Van Poppel might come in handy a little bit more for Danny Martinez, and who knows, maybe the young kid, 23 years of age, Florian Lipowitz, who just got done going podium at Tour of Romandie. Maybe he needs a little bit of help on some of the flatter stages where Danny Van Poppel could come in a little bit more handy and still do the sprints with the lead-out help from Ryan Moulin coming into the sprints. Maybe Danny Van Poppel can show with some top 5s in the sprints, but possibly he's more valuable on the flat stages when we're talking about looking after Danny Martinez, their GC threat here when we start the Giro d'Italia, because Tadej Pogacar certainly is going to win the general classification barring any bad luck. But there's still going to be 2nd and 3rd places available. So Danny Martinez, the Colombian, who's already won 2 stages at Algarve against Remco Evenepoel, he can come in the Giro d'Italia if he's got top form like he's had in the past, because he's gotten top 10 at the Giro d'Italia. He can get himself onto that podium spot, 2nd or 3rd. Can he get ahead of Geraint Thomas? Can he get ahead of Ben O'Connor? I believe it's possible if he's on form, but he's going to need a little bit of luck going his way too. The 3rd rider, Manuel Buchmann, the German rider, the national German champ. He's not coming to the Giro d'Italia. They bumped him off, and in his social post, he put out a blaring social post out there where he was quite unhappy with being bumped off the Giro d'Italia 16 days before it began. And so he puts on a social post out there that not only was he bumped off late, not only is he upset about it, but he was told he was going to be a co-leader here starting the Giro d'Italia along with Leonard Kamna. Now, the director sportif, when we're talking about Gasparato, he comes back and replies to that little bit of a vicious post there from Emmanuel Buchmann. But I'm kind of agreeing with Emmanuel Buchmann, because when we look at Gasparato, he says, first off, he was never given a co-leader spot. Second, he says the strategy has changed here for Bora Hansgrohe. I don't know how it has changed. I mean, you look at what Emmanuel Buchmann does. He goes top 10 in Grand Tours. He went 4th in 2019 at the Tour de France. He went top 10 here, 7th, I believe it was, at the Giro d'Italia in 2022, but top 10 for sure. And then, of course, when we look at his season this year to date in 2024, it hasn't been spectacular, right? He's had 117th on his best placing here to date so far in 2024. But let's look a little bit deeper, because we start looking at the first part of the season. Oman, UAE Tour, like I said, they weren't fantastic results. He's barely breaking the top 20 for one of those, and then he's more or less around top 30. But let's fast forward you a little bit closer here to the Giro d'Italia, and let's go to the Basque Country. Remember the Basque Country, stage 4, When all the top favorite guys crashed, Primoz Roglic, Remco Evenepoel, and Jonas Vingegaard crashed there on stage 4. Well, one of those riders, that was Primoz Roglic. He was riding on fine form. He was wearing the race leader's yellow jersey when he crashed out. So we know most likely Bookman was doing some work throughout the earlier stages up into that stage 4 for, of course, Primoz Roglic. We go all the way up to stage 6, the last and final stage of the Basque Country, and we start looking at the general classification when it started proper. Well, we see, of course, that's Lidl-Trek in the top spot there. That's Skilmos. The second spot, well, that's Max Schachmann. Max Schachmann's going to the Giro, too. I wouldn't take him off the Giro. He looks fantastic this season, and the best season that he's had for a while, for a couple seasons anyways, when he was sitting second on that stage 6. But if I fast forward you all the way up near the finish, the last and final Category 1 climb of the Basque Country for 2024, well, that's Emmanuel Bookman on the front of the peloton. If you can make it to that point on stage 6 to the last and final Category 1 and you're driving it at the front, trying to bring back Marc Soler, who's up the road with a minute gap, you got to have some kind of form coming. So we go back and look at his form. You're like, Chris, he doesn't have any results coming back there. Well, he doesn't at the smaller races, and he wouldn't have been targeting those. His form would have been targeting to come in the Basque Country to help Primoz Roglic, who was wearing the race leader's yellow jersey, like I said, to win the Basque Country. And when you look at his form on stage 6, going up the penultimate climb, the last and final Category 1 climb with 30 kilometers to go, and he's on the front of the peloton, guys, I'm bringing him to the Giro. I don't know what Gasparotto's deal is. And in 2009, when I didn't make the Tour de France, that was because Alberto Contador was on the team, and he didn't like the idea of a third American coming on the team because he knew there was already a rift between him and Lance Armstrong. So he's saying, hey, I can't argue to get Levi Leipheimer off the team, but maybe I can bump off Chris Horner and then he won't go. And I bring on more riders that are a bit more neutral between Lance Armstrong and myself, Alberto Contador. So if they bump me off, then of course Lance doesn't have a for sure rider that's 100% in his court. Now, to be fair, guys, I have never been in anybody's court once the race starts. I am in the court of whatever is best for the team, which is what I would have done. But Alberto Contador clearly had a little bit of stuff going on in the head to believe something different, that the American, Chris Horner, myself, would have been racing for the American, Lance Armstrong. You can see where that chemistry would happen in the Spaniard's head and why he argued that he'd rather have Sergio Polino on the team instead of a Chris Horner. But like I said, had I been on the team in 2009, we win the team time trial, and Lance Armstrong's wearing the race leader's yellow jersey. After that, if Alberto Contador wins the general classification, everybody's happy, and maybe the drama at the dinner table throughout that 09 Tour de France would have been a little bit calmer if Lance Armstrong had spent a couple days in yellow and Alberto Contador had switched over to yellow later and won the Tour de France. Now in 2012, like I said, I fought, I scraped, I begged my way on. Maybe Emmanuel Bookman needs to do a little bit of convincing there with Gasparotto, because up here on Beyond the Coverage and a little bit of story time here on the 1st of May, I'm telling you guys, you can still find a way to get back on, but sometimes there's other things going on in the team that maybe a director sportif is seeing, but it isn't very clear. So if I'm Emmanuel Bookman, the German national champ, current German national champ right now, and rode at the front of the peloton for Max Schachmann during the Basque Country, the hardest week-long stage race in the world, Yes, it's harder than Swiss. Yes, it's harder than Dauphiné. Yes, it's harder than Paris-Nice. Yes, it's harder than Trino Adriatico, because the Basque Country, as I always say on the Butterfly Effect, is the only time when all the GC guys are arriving on their top form. Now, this year, we saw Jonas crash out, Primoz Roglic crash out, of course, along with Remco Evenepoel. So it changed that little quality field on that last and final day 6. But we know from that last and final day 6 on that last and final Category 1 climb, going up Arate, one of the most famous climbs in the Basque Country, I've shown you the picture. That's Emmanuel Bookman on the front. His form has to be pretty good. So maybe Gasparotto just doesn't understand that when he's talking about the strategy changing, unless you're going to go into more strategy of what you're talking about, it doesn't make any sense to me, because you have no pure sprinter going to the Giro, and Emmanuel Bookman is a rider that can get in breakaways and go up the road and win on some of those mountain stages, or he is a rider that can look after their GC guy when we're talking about Danny Martinez, or maybe Florian Lipowitz has a fantastic ride and continues that form from the Tour of Romandie. So having a rider like the national champ Emmanuel Bookman on the team, I take him for sure over both sprinters when we're talking about Mullen and we're talking about Danny Van Poppel, but I see their value a little bit. But you start looking further down the list, they easily have at least 2 riders in the group there on their team of 8 that they can bump off, and I think it's 4 that I would bump off before I bumped off Emmanuel Bookman, so I can understand his gripe of putting up that angry post because I've lived it. But you got to understand, if you're Manuel Bookman, maybe the director sportif sees something a little bit different like Johan Bernil did when, of course, I had that back problem at Tour of California and couldn't show up at Dauphiné or Tour of Suisse. So therefore, he starts wondering, maybe Chris can't make this year's Tour de France. Well, like I said, if you're truthful with your team and if your past history has shown, like it had with mine when I'm talking to Johan Bernil and I'm begging him and pleading him, and finally he changed his mind, put me on the team. I went top 15 that year in the Tour de France, and we won the team classification right here with this gorgeous trophy. So Emmanuel Bookman, maybe instead of arguing, do a little bit of private telephone calls there with Gasparato, because when I look at this 2024 season, it hasn't been remarkable, but there is a hidden gem in there on the Basque Country Stage 6. I'd throw that out there. I'd be sending my power files to him left and right and trying to get into the Giro d'Italia, because if you truly did believe you were a co-leader for the Giro and you truly believed you can go top 10, top 5 podium here at the Giro d'Italia, you got to fight for yourself to get on, but the days are running out. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Make sure you spend a little time over at Bicycle if you're interested in a pre-owned or refurbished bike, because they got a list of them, 20,000 strong, and they are the global marketing place here for pre-owned and refurbished bikes. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.